James Wilson's troubles began on a quiet Tuesday evening. It was the kind of night where you could almost hear the stars twinkle, and the hum of crickets provided a calming soundtrack to suburban life. Yet his peace was shattered when his porch light began flickering erratically. Curious and slightly annoyed, James grabbed his toolbox and flashlight and headed towards the breaker box. What he found made his blood boil. There, tangled among his electrical wires, were makeshift connections leading directly to his neighbor's property. The neighbor Todd was infamous on the street for his laziness and constant complaints. But James had never imagined Todd would stoop so low as to steal electricity. Anger surged through him as he marched to Todd's front door and knocked sharply. No answer. James knocked again, harder this time, until the door finally creaked open to reveal Karen, Todd's friend, and a staunch defender of all things homeowner association related. Karen's arms were crossed, her expression smug. "What do you want, James?" she snapped, barely giving him a chance to speak. "Your buddy Todd is stealing my electricity," James said, his voice firm but controlled. "Tell him to disconnect it now, or I'll have to call the police." Karen let out a laugh that dripped with condescension. "Stealing? Maybe you should check your facts. Todd has every right to use shared utilities." James's jaw tightened. "Shared utilities? This is my private line. I'm giving you one chance to fix this before I handle it myself." The door slammed in his face. Fuming, James returned to his property, determined to put an end to the illegal connection. By the next morning, he had contacted an electrician to remove the rogue wires and secure his electrical system. But the nightmare was only beginning. A week later, James received a court summons. Todd, backed by Karen and the homeowner association, was suing him for damaging shared infrastructure. The absurdity of the claim left James speechless. But as he read further, he realized the homeowner association's fingerprints were all over this. The homeowner association president, Mr. Grayson, was a manipulative man who thrived on control. Over the years, James had watched him orchestrate petty fines and dubious rules, but this was a new low. Grayson's signature appeared on several documents submitted to the court, each claiming that James had violated community agreements by tampering with common property. James prepared for the battle of his life. He spent days gathering evidence, including photos of the illegal connections and statements from the electrician who had fixed the issue. In court, he presented his case with a calm determination, pointing out every inconsistency in the homeowner association's claims. Karen, seated smugly beside Todd, whispered to him throughout the hearing. The judge's stern gaze flicked toward them several times, clearly annoyed by their behavior. When Todd took the stand, his flimsy arguments fell apart under questioning. By the end of the session, the judge dismissed the lawsuit, ruling in James's favor. It was a victory, but James's celebration was short-lived. That night, flames illuminated his backyard as his wooden fence erupted into fire. James bolted outside with a garden hose, battling the blaze until firefighters arrived. As he stood amidst the charred remains of his fence, he caught a glimpse of Todd's silhouette retreating into the shadows, Karen's mocking laughter echoing faintly from her porch. James refused to be intimidated. He installed security cameras and filed a police report, but the harassment continued. The homeowner association began issuing fines for fabricated violations, such as unauthorized repairs and excessive noise, despite James having lived quietly for years. Desperate for answers, James dug into the homeowner association's operations. Late one night, he discovered that several of Grayson's property deals conveniently aligned with homes that had faced aggressive homeowner association scrutiny. It became clear that Grayson, with Karen's help, was targeting homeowners to drive them out and acquire their properties at discounted rates. Armed with this information, James decided to take the fight to the next level. He confronted Grayson during the next homeowner association meeting, presenting his findings in front of a packed room. Voices rose, accusations flew, and Grayson's calm facade began to crack. But just as James thought he had the upper hand, Grayson played his trump card. He revealed that the homeowner association had voted, without James's presence, to revoke his rights as a member due to behavior unbecoming of a community resident. The meeting erupted into chaos, leaving James facing yet another uphill battle. The revocation of his homeowner association membership rights was a blow James hadn't anticipated. The meeting dissolved into chaos after the announcement, with neighbors whispering and casting furtive glances his way. Karen, of course, looked smug as ever, perched in the back corner like a self-satisfied cat watching its prey. James left the meeting with a storm raging in his mind. The absurdity of the decision only fueled his determination to uncover the depths of the homeowner association's corruption. If Grayson and Karen thought they could break him with bureaucratic tactics, they were sorely mistaken. The harassment escalated almost immediately. Within days, James received notices for fines totaling thousands of dollars. Each letter cited obscure or fabricated violations, unapproved paint on his fence, excessive lawn height, and even allegations that his garden hose was improperly stored. James kept every notice, meticulously documenting the escalating campaign against him. Then came the blockade. One evening, as James returned home from work, he found a metal barrier erected across his driveway, adorned with a bright red "No Trespassing" sign. Confused and livid, he parked on the street and approached the obstruction. Attached to the sign was a letter from the homeowner association claiming his driveway was now considered communal property due to violations of property upkeep standards. James called the police, but the responding officer merely shrugged. "This is a civil matter," the officer said, handing James a pamphlet on how to file a complaint. "You'll have to take it up with the homeowner association in court." The frustration was mounting, but James wasn't about to back down. He called a lawyer and began preparing his case. In the meantime, he also started reaching out to other residents who had clashed with the homeowner association in the past. What he discovered was both shocking and validating. One elderly couple, the Thompsons, had been forced to sell their home after a similar campaign of fines and harassment. Another resident, a young mother named Lisa, described how the homeowner association had taken legal action to force her to remove a swing set, claiming it violated aesthetic guidelines. Each story painted a picture of an organization hell-bent on controlling the community through intimidation and financial pressure. Armed with these testimonies, James began to piece together a timeline of the homeowner association's actions. Patterns emerged. Grayson's targeted harassment of homeowners coincided with suspiciously low offers on their properties. Karen, it seemed, acted as his enforcer, spreading rumors and stirring unrest among neighbors. James's growing resolve to fight back led him to hire a private investigator. The investigator's findings confirmed James's suspicions. Grayson was working with a shady development company, Landmark Builders, to acquire properties in the neighborhood. Landmark Builders, in turn, planned to redevelop the area into luxury townhomes, profiting immensely while displacing longtime residents. Armed with this explosive evidence, James decided it was time to take the fight public. He organized a community meeting, carefully avoiding the homeowner association's usual channels to prevent interference. Flyers appeared on doorsteps overnight, inviting residents to learn the truth about the homeowner association's corruption. The turnout was better than James had hoped. The room buzzed with a mix of curiosity and simmering anger as James laid out the evidence. Photos of Grayson's meetings with Landmark Builders, copies of manipulated homeowner association votes, and testimonies from harassed homeowners left the crowd stunned. Karen showed up halfway through the meeting, her face a mask of fury. She stormed to the front of the room, interrupting James mid-sentence. "This is slander," she shrieked. "You have no proof of any wrongdoing, and this little stunt will only hurt the community." James stood firm, pointing to the pile of evidence on the table. "The proof is right here," he said, his voice steady, "and the only ones hurting this community are you and Grayson." The room erupted into heated debates. Some residents, emboldened by James's courage, began sharing their own stories of harassment and intimidation. Others, loyal to the homeowner association, accused James of causing unnecessary conflict. Karen tried to regain control, but the tide was turning. The next day, James found his car vandalized. Its tires were slashed and the words "traitor" were spray painted across the driver's side door. Shaken but not defeated, James reported the incident to the police and doubled down on his security measures. His cameras captured a shadowy figure fleeing his driveway late that night, and while the footage was inconclusive, James had a strong suspicion who was behind it. Meanwhile, Grayson and Karen were scrambling to contain the fallout. Grayson issued a statement dismissing James's claims as baseless accusations from a disgruntled resident. But behind the scenes, cracks in their operation were beginning to show. Several homeowner association board members privately reached out to James, expressing doubts about Grayson's leadership and offering their support. James knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time, he felt the momentum shifting. Grayson and Karen were losing their grip on the community, and James was determined to see justice served, no matter the cost. James woke up to a knock on his door early the next morning. Standing on his porch was a man in a crisp suit, holding a briefcase. "Mr. Wilson," the man asked, flashing a practiced smile. James narrowed his eyes. "Who's asking?" "Alan Pierce," the man replied smoothly. "Legal counsel for Landmark Builders. May I come in?" James stepped outside, shutting the door behind him. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it right here." Pierce's smile faltered briefly. He opened his briefcase and handed James an envelope. "This is a formal offer from Landmark Builders to purchase your property. I'd advise you to consider it carefully. Given the current tensions in the neighborhood, it might be in your best interest to sell and move on." James opened the envelope and scanned the letter inside. The offer was insulting, barely half of what his home was worth. He laughed bitterly and shoved the letter back at Pierce. "Not interested, and if you think you can intimidate me, you're wasting your time." Pierce's smile disappeared completely. "I'd think twice before refusing, Mr. Wilson. Landmark Builders has significant resources. We'd hate to see things become complicated." James stepped closer, his voice ice cold. "Get off my property." Pierce's eyes flickered with annoyance, but he turned and walked away. James watched him until he disappeared down the street. He knew this was just the beginning. Later that day, James noticed unfamiliar vehicles parked near his home. Men in construction uniforms lingered on the sidewalk, pretending to study blueprints but clearly observing his property. When he confronted them, they claimed to be surveying the area for upcoming projects. But James wasn't buying it. He suspected Landmark Builders was trying to intimidate him into selling. Determined to fight back, James reached out to local media. A small-town newspaper agreed to cover his story, intrigued by the allegations of corruption and harassment. A journalist visited James's home, recording his account and documenting the vandalism and fabricated fines. The article, titled "Battle for Fairness: One Man's Fight Against Homeowner Association Corruption," was published online and quickly gained traction. The increased attention seemed to rattle Grayson and Karen. During the next homeowner association meeting, Grayson attempted to dismiss the article as sensationalist nonsense, but several residents challenged him. One even accused Grayson of targeting their family with similar tactics. Karen's composure cracked as well. She confronted James after the meeting, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you?" she hissed. "You're just a troublemaker stirring up division." James met her glare without flinching. "The truth has a way of coming out, Karen. You and Grayson should start preparing for the fallout." The fallout came sooner than expected. 2 days after the article went live, James received a tip from a former homeowner association board member who had resigned under suspicious circumstances. The ex-member, a middle-aged woman named Linda, revealed that Grayson had pressured her to sign off on fraudulent votes and manipulated records to justify fines against certain homeowners. Linda agreed to go on record, and James passed her testimony to the journalist. The follow-up article painted an even darker picture of the homeowner association's operations, linking Grayson's actions directly to Landmark Builders' redevelopment plans. The revelation caused an uproar in the community, with many residents demanding Grayson's resignation. In retaliation, Grayson escalated his attacks. James received a cease and desist letter accusing him of defamation. The letter threatened legal action if he continued to spread falsehoods about the homeowner association. Unfazed, James forwarded the letter to his lawyer and publicly announced his intention to countersue for harassment and damages. The tension reached a boiling point when James's security cameras captured footage of someone tampering with his property. The figure, dressed in dark clothing, was seen cutting wires to his outdoor lights and leaving behind a spray-painted message on his garage door. "Leave now." James reported the incident to the police, who promised to investigate but offered little reassurance. Fed up with the lack of action, James decided to take matters into his own hands. He organized a neighborhood watch group, rallying residents who had also been targeted by the homeowner association. Together, they patrolled the streets, documented suspicious activities, and shared information about the homeowner association's latest tactics. The watch group's efforts paid off. One night, a patrol caught 2 men trying to install surveillance equipment near James's home. The men claimed to be contractors working for the homeowner association, but when questioned, they couldn't produce any authorization. The police were called and the men were taken in for questioning. The incident further eroded the homeowner association's credibility. Meanwhile, James' countersuit gained traction. His lawyer uncovered discrepancies in the homeowner association's financial records, including unaccounted funds and suspicious payments to landmark builders. The mounting evidence painted a clear picture of collusion and corruption. As the legal battle intensified, James found himself both exhausted and invigorated. He knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time he felt the scales tipping in his favor. Grayson and Karen's empire of intimidation was beginning to crumble, and James was determined to see it through to the end. The courtroom was packed. News of James Wilson's countersuit against the homeowner association had drawn the attention of local media, and a sense of anticipation hung in the air. James sat at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer beside him, while Grayson and Karen occupied the defense's side. Their legal team looked polished and smug, but James's determination hadn't wavered. The trial began with James's lawyer presenting the evidence they'd painstakingly gathered. Financial records showing unaccounted funds, emails between Grayson and landmark builders discussing the redevelopment plans, and testimonies from residents who had been harassed by the homeowner association. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the defense's credibility, and by the time Linda, the former board member, took the stand, the courtroom was riveted. Mr. Grayson frequently pressured us to approve fines and sanctions without proper justification, Linda testified. When I refused, he threatened to make my life difficult. I eventually resigned because I couldn't stand being part of something so corrupt. Karen visibly squirmed as Linda's words echoed through the courtroom. Grayson's lawyer attempted to discredit Linda, but her testimony held firm. It was a pivotal moment that shifted the momentum in James's favor. Outside the courtroom, tensions in the neighborhood continued to escalate. Support for James was growing, but so was the opposition's desperation. One night, James's security cameras captured footage of someone attempting to break into his garage. The figure wore a hoodie and gloves, making identification difficult, but James suspected the act was no coincidence. The break-in attempt was the last straw. James went to the police with the footage, demanding stronger action. This time, the authorities took him seriously. Officers increased patrols in the area, and an investigation into the homeowner association's activities was officially opened. Meanwhile, Karen's behavior became increasingly erratic. At a community event, she confronted James in front of a crowd, accusing him of destroying the neighborhood and spreading lies. James calmly refuted her claims, pointing out that the evidence spoke for itself. The crowd's reaction was mixed, but it was clear Karen's influence was waning. The turning point came during the second week of the trial. A forensic accountant hired by James's lawyer presented damning evidence. Large sums of money had been funneled from the homeowner association's accounts to a shell company tied to landmark builders. The paper trail was undeniable, and Grayson's attempts to explain it away fell flat. Karen took the stand next, her confidence clearly shaken. Under cross-examination, James's lawyer cornered her with questions about her role in the homeowner association's activities. Karen stumbled over her answers, and her usual smug demeanor dissolved into frustration. "Isn't it true," the lawyer pressed, "that you acted as an enforcer for Mr. Grayson, intimidating residents into compliance?" Karen's face turned red. "I was only doing what was best for the community," she snapped. "So you admit to participating in these tactics?" Karen hesitated, realizing too late that she'd walked into a trap. The lawyer let her silence linger before turning to the jury. No further questions. As the trial neared its conclusion, Grayson and Karen's defense unraveled completely. Witness after witness testified about the harassment they'd endured, painting a vivid picture of the homeowner association's systematic abuse of power. By the time closing arguments were made, the outcome seemed inevitable. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. The homeowner association was found guilty of harassment, financial misconduct, and collusion with landmark builders. Grayson and Karen were held personally liable, and the court ordered substantial damages to be paid to James and other affected residents. In the aftermath of the trial, the neighborhood began to change. Grayson resigned as homeowner association president in disgrace, and Karen moved away shortly after. The remaining board members dissolved the homeowner association, and a new resident-led association was formed with a focus on transparency and fairness. James became a local hero, his story inspiring others to stand up against corruption. The media coverage brought national attention to the abuses of power often hidden behind the facade of homeowners associations. James, however, was just glad to have his life back. One evening, as he stood on his porch looking out at his now peaceful neighborhood, a neighbor approached. It was Lisa, the young mother who had also been targeted by the homeowner association. "Thank you for everything you did," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You didn't just fight for yourself, you fought for all of us." James smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "We fought together, and we won." The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind of change. With Grayson and Karen out of the picture, the neighborhood began to feel lighter, as if a long-standing storm had finally passed. James Wilson's victory against the homeowner association had not only exposed corruption, but had also united the community in ways no one had expected. But James knew the battle wasn't entirely over. Landmark Builders, though publicly embarrassed by their association with the scandal, hadn't officially withdrawn their redevelopment plans. The new resident-led association, formed in the aftermath of the trial, took swift action to challenge the development in court, citing improper permits and environmental concerns. James, now seen as a natural leader, was asked to chair the effort. One morning, James received a knock at his door. This time, it wasn't a lawyer or a hostile neighbor, but Lisa, the young mother he had helped inspire to stand up against the homeowner association. "I've been doing some research," she said, holding a folder of documents. "You need to see this." Inside were records she'd uncovered about Landmark Builders' dealings in other neighborhoods. The company had a history of shady tactics, from bribing local officials to forcibly displacing homeowners through questionable legal maneuvers. Lisa's findings painted a grim picture, but also provided crucial leverage. "This is exactly what we need," James said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Let's take this to the new board." At the next community meeting, James presented Lisa's findings. The room buzzed with outrage as residents learned of Landmark Builders' tactics. Several volunteered to join the legal fight, forming a task force to challenge the developer on every front. Lawyers, environmentalists, and even a retired city planner from the neighborhood stepped forward, offering their expertise. The task force's first victory came quickly. A review of the permits Landmark Builders had filed revealed multiple discrepancies, including forged signatures and false claims about community approval. The city council, now under pressure from both the media and the neighborhood's unified voice, suspended the permits pending further investigation. Landmark Builders responded with a predictable but heavy-handed tactic. They filed a counter-suit against the neighborhood, claiming defamation and financial losses. The move backfired spectacularly. The counter-suit brought even more scrutiny to the company's operations, and investigative journalists began digging deeper into their past projects. Stories of displaced families and environmental violations surfaced, turning public opinion firmly against the developer. Amidst this growing pressure, James found himself in yet another confrontation with a familiar figure. One evening, as he returned home, a sleek black car pulled up in front of his house. Out stepped Alan Pierce, the same lawyer who had delivered the insulting buyout offer months ago. "Mr. Wilson," Pierce said, his tone icy, "Landmark Builders would like to propose a settlement. Let's end this amicably." James crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "What kind of settlement?" "A generous donation to the community fund, the withdrawal of all legal actions, and a commitment to preserve the neighborhood as it is," Pierce said, handing over a neatly typed document. "In exchange, you and the task force agree to cease all further action against Landmark Builders." James scanned the document, noting the carefully worded clauses designed to shield Landmark Builders from future accountability. "This isn't a settlement," he said finally. "It's a bribe." Pierce's composure faltered. "Mr. Wilson, think about what's best for everyone. You've already made your point. There's no need to drag this out further." James stepped closer, his voice firm. "What's best for everyone is holding your company accountable. Tell your bosses we're not interested." Pierce left without another word, his jaw tight with frustration. The showdown with Landmark Builders culminated in a public hearing at City Hall. Residents packed the chamber, holding signs and wearing pins that read, "Protect our homes." James spoke passionately about the importance of preserving the community's integrity and standing up to corporate greed. The hearing lasted for hours, with both sides presenting their arguments. Landmark Builders representatives tried to paint their redevelopment plan as a benefit to the community, but the overwhelming evidence of their misconduct made their case untenable. When the City Council announced its decision to deny Landmark Builders permits and launch a full investigation into their practices, the room erupted in cheers. For James and the neighborhood, it was a hard-fought victory that reaffirmed their power when united. Months later, the neighborhood had fully transformed. The community task force evolved into a permanent residence council, ensuring transparency and fairness in all future decisions. The scars left by the homeowner association's corruption and Landmark Builders' aggression began to heal as neighbors worked together to rebuild trust. James, though relieved to finally have his peace, remained a vigilant advocate for the community. He declined offers to run for official positions, preferring to stay in the background and support others in taking the lead. For him, the greatest reward was seeing the neighborhood thrive. One evening, as James sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, Lisa joined him with her son. The boy played in the yard while Lisa smiled at James. "You know, Ma," she said, "I think you've shown all of us what it means to stand up for what's right." James shrugged, a humble grin on his face. "Sometimes all it takes is one person to light the spark. The rest is up to everyone else." As the sun set over the peaceful neighborhood, James felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The battle had been long and grueling, but in the end, justice had prevailed, and the community he loved was stronger than ever.